So in this video, I'm going to be explaining how to actually bulk properly for skinny guys. And I'm not just going to give this advice of just eat more because obviously it's not that simple. When I first started working out, I didn't really know about bulking and I didn't know how to do it properly either. And so for the first year, I made very slow gains or really no gains at all because I was just eating at maintenance. So then I realized I wasn't making any progress and I tried to bulk, but I did it with the mentality of just eat more. And I wasn't tracking anything. I wasn't tracking my calories. I wasn't tracking my weight. I wasn't tracking anything. And it basically led me to nowhere. But then when I started tracking things and bulking properly, that's when I made consistent gains, the gains that I should have been making. And so obviously a bulk is necessary if you actually want to build muscle at an optimal rate. I would recommend taking your bulk very slow and only being in a small surplus, because if you're in way too big of a surplus, then you're just going to get skinny fat if you're skinny, because fat can accumulate a lot faster than you can build muscle. So if you try to bulk really aggressively and you're very skinny, then you could end up looking skinny fat because you're not going to build enough muscle in the time that you gain a bunch of fat to actually look sort of big. And muscle growth is a slow process, so you just gotta be patient. And another reason why you want to bulk slow is because, especially when you're young, you don't want to be cutting a whole lot. Now, how do you actually bulk properly to get predictable and consistent results like I did? Well, it's all about tracking things. If you don't track anything, then you're just shooting in the dark. And how could you even know you're in a surplus? How do you know you're actually building muscle? So the main things you need to track are your weight and calories, but also things like your workouts, like your strength numbers, measurements like your arm size, and also progress pictures. But if you're not the analytical type, then you can join my community where we can do one-on-one coaching calls and I'll manage all the metrics. So the link will be in the description. So these metrics really fall into two categories: manipulated variables and responding variables. So the main manipulated variables are calories. That just means that's the thing you're changing, right? And so you're basically playing around with your calories based on other things like weight, which is a responding variable. So you change your calories and then you see how your weight responds to that change. And then you're basically using the information from your weight to adjust your calories. And also workouts are a manipulated variable as well, because you can change what you're doing if it's not working properly. And things like measurements or progress pictures are also responding variables, which means you can look at those things to see if what you're doing is actually working. So that's great and all, but how do you actually track each one of these things? So let's start with how you track your weight. So basically, obviously you need a scale, and every morning you just want to weigh yourself and write it down somewhere. Make sure you track yourself before you've eaten anything and in similar clothing day to day. And you want to be taking weekly averages of your weight to accurately assess your progression. Because if you just look at the day-to-day weight, then it sort of fluctuates up and down. So when you're looking at your weight, be patient and don't adjust your calories just because one day your weight was too low. You really want to be looking at the weekly averages. Next, how do you track your calories? Well, I already have a video on this because it does go kind of in depth. But basically, you're going to need a food scale and some sort of app to track your calories on, like Chronometer. That's what I use. And you're basically just going to want to weigh everything that you eat and track it. I don't have time to go super in depth on this topic in this video, but I highly recommend you watch my other video about tracking calories. The next thing is tracking your workouts, and this one's also kind of in depth, and I have another video on that. I think it's called This is Why You Are Building Muscle or something like that. But basically, you just want to track each exercise of each workout and just write down how many reps you got with what weight. And I use Google Sheets. And for measurements and progress pictures, you can really take these as frequently as you want, but I would say no more than once a week because you're probably not going to see much change in 1 week. And typically once a month is sufficient. For progress pictures, try to make it obviously in the same lighting, in the same area, and with no pump. Measurements should be taken without a pump for most accuracy, and I would say to measure things like your arms or your waist and maybe your neck if you're training your neck. So if you see that your weight is not going up, then what you do is you up your calories. And if your weight is going up at a solid rate, then you keep your calories the same. You you want to be gaining roughly 0.5 pounds per week. But this depends on a lot of things like your training age. Obviously, if you're more advanced, this will be less. And if you're a beginner, then you can build muscle quicker. So maybe your weight is going up, but you see that your measurements and progress pictures are looking no different. And maybe you notice you're getting a bit of fat. Then that could be training related. Maybe you're not training properly. Because the scale just shows you how much weight you're gaining. It doesn't show you how much muscle or fat you're gaining. But as long as you're training properly, then I think you should be fine. And as long as your numbers are going up, and this doesn't have to be like super quick, not every week, maybe once every 2 weeks, like it's a slow process. And you should be training somewhat properly before you even start a bulk, because otherwise you're just gonna gain fat. By the way, most of your time should be spent in a bulk because that's when the gains really happen. So don't be cutting too often or just maintaining. Like, you want to be spending most of your time in a slow bulk. So some examples, let's say your weight isn't going up, then obviously you add a bit of calories, maybe like 100 calories or 200. And another one, if your weight is going up, but your measurements and progress photos and training are not going up, then you need to assess your training. Now, if your weight is going up and if your workouts are going up, like your strength numbers are increasing fairly quickly, but your measurements and progress pictures are not, and of course this is like in kind of a longer time period, but this could mean that you might need a form reset and you might be applying progressive cheating and not progressive overload. Or you just have to be patient, like I said, because your measurements are not going to change very quickly. Okay, so how do you start a bulk? If this is your first bulk, or you're starting to bulk properly and you want to actually start a bulk. So what you do is for 1 week before, then you have to track your calories and your weight and all these things for 1 week, but you're not really aiming to be in a surplus or like hitting any calorie goals. You're just sort of trying to find your maintenance. So try to eat a certain amount of calories to where your weight sort of stays the same. Then to start the bulk, just add 200 to 300 calories on top of what you're already eating. One thing to keep in mind is that it's better to add too little than too much, because if you add too little, then nothing really happens. But if you add too much, then you could gain too much fat, and then you're gonna have to. That's just gonna shorten your bulk. Then you're gonna have to cut more afterwards. So basically, you add your 200 to 300 calories, and then you just adjust from there. So you look at your weights. If it's not going up, add more. If it's going up too fast, then you can cut back a little bit or just keep it the same. But throughout the bulk, you're constantly going to have to be adding calories anyways, because since you're gaining weight, your maintenance is also increasing. Which means even if you hit the perfect amount of calories when you first start and you're gaining exactly 0.5 pounds per week, you're still going to have to add more as the weeks go on. And then when you end your bulk, obviously just go back to maintenance, or whatever you're doing after that, maybe a cut. But just keep in mind that your maintenance is now higher since you've gained weight. So when to end your bulk is basically just when your body fat percentage gets too high, and this can be sort of preference, but generally around 18% is the cutoff, and no more than 20%. By the way, do not be in a surplus or bulk during periods of deload, active rest, maintenance in terms of your training, and just times where you're not training hard and consistently. Because if you do bulk during these times, then you're just going to be getting more fat than muscle. Now, for your first 3 to 4 months of training for beginners, I don't really think it's necessary to bulk, but you'll soon realize that it is quite necessary once you actually start training more. Because when you're first starting, if you try to bulk and everything and track everything, then it just gives more variables to worry about, and I think it's better to just focus on the training and other things to sort of perfect those, and then focus on the bulking, because in the beginning, it's not even really necessary to bulk. You can still make a lot of good gains since you've just started, so I think it's better to just prioritize other things. Then when you actually need to, you can start learning to bulk, and then you'll just make good gains. And one last thing, you want to make sure you're training hard and smart before you bulk, so that you can ensure you're optimizing your ratio between muscle and fat. And if you're a skinny guy with 0 to 3 years of training experience and you want to learn how to train properly, then you can join my community below, where I'll give you one-on-one coaching, I'll make you an entire free workout program, and more. But that's it for the video. See you in the next one.